Bye. Hello, welcome to Knock Knock Eye with me, your host, Dr. Glockenflecken. This is your one-stop shop for all things eyeballs and corporate practice of medicine, but not like a super in-depth into corporate practice of medicine, just like occasional things. And I don't have like a formal health policy background. You're gonna have to go to someone else for that. But I can distill like difficult things that happen in the healthcare system into like, understandable language. I guess that's like one of my superpowers. Part of that's just because I need it distilled just so my brain understands it. The example I always use is pharmacy benefit managers, which took me a long time to figure out. I actually had to go and talk to a community pharmacist and have them explain to me what exactly a pharmacy benefit manager is, what do they do, and then I was able to figure it out. But it was a process. And so that's kind of how I am with most things in the healthcare system. It takes a while. I got to wrap my brain around it and translate it into Glockenflecken language, and then I present it to all of you. That's what I've been doing with this PeaceHealth disaster. So I'm going to give you an update on that. And then I do have a little bit of there's a new possible treatment for retinoblastoma. You're going to want to stick around to the end of the episode to hear all about that potential treatment. I want to emphasize that before we get to it later. Okay, so PeaceHealth. As of today, so these episodes, they come out about a week after I record them. And so what we just had is the last day of testimony in the PeaceHealth case. So just to refresh your memory, in case you haven't been seeing the videos, I've been updating my social media channels with the case. Here I can speak a little bit longer, which is great, and just give my thoughts. So Eugene Emergency Physicians again has filed a lawsuit against PeaceHealth and Apollo MD. PeaceHealth has decided not to renew the contract for Eugene Emergency Physicians, the local group. They've been living and working in the Eugene area. For 35 years, this group has been there. It's an independent group, what they call a democratic group, which means they just come together, they make decisions, hiring, firing, contracts, whatever it is. PeaceHealth decided, nope, you are not going to have that anymore, or you can try. You can submit a proposal. That's what they did. They did a request for proposals, what's called an RFP process, and they got there were 4 major groups that submitted proposals that had a decent chance of actually getting this contract. One was Eugene Emergency Physicians, so the group that they're already there, they submitted a proposal. There was Apollo MD, a group called Vituity, and also Team Health. So Vituity, Team Health, really Apollo MD, they all kind of have a similar model, but they're different. Vituity, Team Health, very much more like private equity. Apollo MD purports themselves to be physician owned. So we've been going through testimony. We had Apollo MD doctors come up and they tried to explain their labyrinthine business structure. We had some Eugene Emergency Physicians come up. This all happened about a week and a half ago. Most recently, the testimony came from PeaceHealth, the PeaceHealth side. So this case, I'm going to just go a little bit bigger picture here because I've been getting a lot of questions on social media, like what exactly is the outcome you want to have here? So what the crux of this case is whether or not Apollo MD and PeaceHealth and the agreement they've made with each other, if this violates a recently passed back in just last year state law limiting this type of corporate practice of medicine, and what it specifically limits. And I'm not going to go through the whole law. In fact, they're in the hearing, they're trying to actually here in a few days, they're going to actually go through the law and there's going to be arguments and things. But basically, it specifically tries to limit what's called an MSO, a management service organization, which is what Apollo MD is. Apollo MD is an MSO. Their headquarters is in Atlanta, Georgia, and their purpose is to provide quote unquote support services to the hundreds of individual businesses that Apollo MD has started in different states all over the country. They then, once they make these little companies, they pick physicians to go and be the quote unquote medical director and / owner of these companies. So you have the MSO, Apollo MD headquarters, Atlanta, hundreds of little companies with a doctor there who was handpicked by the executives at the MSO. The reason they do this is primarily to try and circumvent existing corporate practice of medicine laws around the country. A lot of states, almost all states, have some corporate practice of medicine law on the books. Most of the states do not enforce it. I bet most people probably don't even know their state has an anti-corporate practice of medicine law. But what's happened over the last 20, 30 years, because we've been seeing this, especially more so over the last decade, this massive influx of these types of companies, Apollo MD, that have an MSO and then the medical practice that they manage. This has been blowing up. So many of these, usually they're private equity owned. This one, again, questionable whether or not it's private equity in Apollo MD, but it's been blowing up. There's so much of this happening now. So Oregon, prior to 2025, had one of these anti-corporate practice of medicine laws that was okay, but it was kind of like all the others. And then what they did in 2025 was strengthen it, specifically targeting these MSOs and saying, if you have this kind of relationship, you cannot have any influence. It has to be entirely physician owned. And so all these stipulations about this MSO clinical entity relationship. And so that's what this is all about, really, is this decision by PeaceHealth to go with Apollo MD. Is this whole thing legal from a state law standpoint? So we've heard all this testimony back and forth, and the really what this is what's called a preliminary injunctive hearing. So it's not like a jury trial. There's no jury. This is just the judge and the two parties, EEP and the lawyers, and Apollo MD / PeaceHealth and their lawyers. A win for EEP here. Here's what it looks like. It looks like it's an injunction. So it basically means there is enough smoke here. There is enough evidence in favor of the plaintiff, which is Eugene Emergency Physician, enough evidence in favor of them that we are going to put a stop to this transition until more work can be done. And by work, I mean usually a much bigger trial. This is technically a preliminary trial. So this is like a fast track version that you ask for if there's a time constraint. And there is here, because EEP's contract runs out for two of the hospitals on June 1st. For the big one, Riverbend Hospital, runs out on July 1st. So everybody has to try to figure out what to do in a very short amount of time. So that's why this is considered a preliminary hearing. There's some evidence, some discovery, but not as much as you would see in a full-blown trial where there's a lot more on the line. This, if the judge rules in favor of EEP, then we stop the transition. That would be the best case scenario for this hearing. Then what happens? I've got a lot of questions about this. What happens? Does PeaceHealth do they go back to EEP? Do they dig their heels in and try to find another group. Well, and we don't know. Honestly, we don't know yet. Next week, I will have the answer for you. What's going to happen next and what the outcome of this is. We're gonna know a lot more. But I think is what I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know. I'm not in the minds of PeaceHealth, but from a PeaceHealth standpoint, like they just need to. I would think they just want to get on with it. They just want look. You have an emergency you have in the Eugene area. You have 30 something MDs ready to go. Eugene emergency physicians, they want to work. They've been working. They've been staffing during all of this. They've still been staffing all of their shifts. They want to work. And so why wouldn't PeaceHealth just be like, okay, well, all right, our bad. Okay, we'll just give you the contract, keep working, let's try to repair our relationship. And that's going to be key. Can the relationship be repaired? I can't speak for our Eugene emergency physicians. All right. But I know that they feel dedicated to the community, to their patients, to their colleagues. And you can feel that. You can see that's why they're fighting for this, because they care about the community. Wouldn't you want those doctors around? I mean, you got to staff your emergency departments. So if it's not Apollo MD, who's it going to be within the next month and a half? Right? Like, I don't see what other option there would be in order to even have a hospital, right? You can't just not staff it unless PeaceHealth is going to go and try and do try to hire the people themselves, but that would be a huge undertaking, and there's no way you can get that done in the next month and a half. So anyway, that's what I think would end up happening is in some way, shape, or form, the Eugene emergency physicians would get to continue doing their jobs beyond June and July 1st. I don't know that for sure. But the one thing I want to talk about today is just what happened in the last bit of testimony from PeaceHealth. There's so much. Oh man, here's in my mind the best part about this trial. The best thing to come out of it is that it forces these companies in PeaceHealth and Apollo MD to reveal things about themselves that they otherwise would not reveal ever. Like on the Apollo MD side, physicians, we had the CEO and then the Dr. Chapman, who's the patsy who was selected by Dr. Patel to go and be the face of the shell company now operating in Oregon. He's the only employee of it, by the way, Lane Emergency Physicians. He was like, Dr. Chapman, if you could go and do this, be the owner of this company, and by the way, you got to testify in federal court. That very nice, wonderful thing to do I'm sure that's a company that really cares about you right there. And I mentioned this in one of my videos, but it was pointed out to me that Dr. Patel, after he testified, he pieced out on a private jet. I don't know if it was a private jet. Anyway, he left. He went back to Atlanta immediately. You'd think he would stay there for the patsy he picked as moral support while that person testified, Dr. Chapman. But no moral support. No, nothing at all. He just I'm done. All right. Good luck, Dr. Chapman. As opposed to Eugene emergency physicians who have packed the courtroom every day with supporters, doctors, nurses, community members. Incredible support for Eugene emergency. That just shows you where we are with this in terms of public relations. Everybody is on Eugene emergency physician's side. You love to see it. All right. So PeaceHealth got up on. So here's what happened. We heard this another example of why lawsuits need to happen in these situations, because we had two members of the RFP committee. Again, this was the committee tasked with giving this emergency medicine contract to one of the groups. And as we heard earlier in testimony, Apollo MD finished with the top score. Eugene emergency physicians, the lowest score. So we wanted to dig in, like what exactly was going on here. So was this like legitimate? Was it a fraudulent process? So there were two members that came up, and we were able to actually see these scores. So I'm going to give you a few of the criteria. So there's like apparently this for the committee, there's like a list of criteria, and they would score each group. All right. So here's just a few of the things. Okay. And you make up your mind whether or not this was like legitimate or not. So here's one of the criteria: staffing and call coverage. Uh, and what basically that amounts to is like a transition plan. All right. Do you have a transition plan in order to not have any lapses in staffing and call coverage of these emergency departments? Apollo MD scored a 4.1. Very impressive. Very impressive. Out of 5. 4.1 out of 5. Eugene Emergency Physicians scored 0.1 out of 5. And you know why? Because they don't need a transition plan. They're already working there. Seriously, they got a 0.1 out of 5 compared to 4.1 out of 5. Staffing and call coverage. Oh, and by the way, Eugene Emergency Physicians never missed a shift. They have never not staffed a shift in 35 years. Red flag number 1. Next was the criteria: do you have a locums team in place? Of course, Apollo MD has a locums team in place. They scored perfect score. Eugene Emergency Physicians, 0. Why would they have a locums team in place? They never use locums because they don't have recruiting issues. They have no problems recruiting. They don't have to dip into these temporary doctors that come in for a couple weeks at a time, stay at a Holiday Inn Express, and then go home. Why would they have a locums team in place? Red flag number 2. Next is, do you support or are you in the process of supporting or have the ability to support a medical director? Eugene Emergency Physicians scored last, even though they do have a medical director. They have a medical director. All right, they scored a 3 out of 5. Apollo MD scored a 4.5 out of 5, even though they have no medical director. They, at the time of this RFP process, folks, at the time of this process, Lane Emergency Physicians did not exist. Dr. Chapman was just doing his thing in Illinois. They had no knowledge of Dr. Chapman. They had no knowledge of Lane Emergency Physicians, the shell company that would be set up in Oregon. All they had was Apollo MD in Atlanta, Georgia, which employs 0 doctors. Yet somehow they scored a 4.5 out of 5 on a criteria that says, do you have a medical director? Red flag number 3. And the last one, this is the best one. This is the criteria was, do you have a presence as far as providing services in Oregon? Do you currently provide services in Oregon? Eugene Emergency Physicians scored a perfect 1 because obviously they do have a presence in Oregon. Team Health also had a perfect score because they have a presence in Oregon. Vituity also scored a perfect score because they have a doctor, at least one, somewhere in the state of Oregon. Apollo MD scored a 0.6 out of 1, even though they have no presence whatsoever in Oregon. Nobody in Oregon. It's just a hope and a prayer that, the committee's like, they're eventually they're going to have someone in Oregon. So of course we had to give them something. So it just, the evidence could not be more damning as far as how fraudulent this RFP process is. It made it very clear that there was, and this is my opinion based on what I just told you, that PeaceHealth was they wanted EEP to lose. They wanted EEP to lose. How do you justify any of this scoring unless you're like trying to figure out a way to game the system here? Also, and the last thing about the RFP is there were no practicing physicians on the committee. And again, this is a committee whose job it was to choose doctors to see patients. So you'd think you'd want a committee member who actually sees patients, but no. And then finally, and the nail in the coffin, was that the one of the committee members was none other than Jim McGovern, the CEO of Riverbend Hospital, who was placed on administrative leave because he was found to be heavily influencing or trying to influence clinical decision-making in the emergency department, something that legally he cannot do with his level of medical license. He's on administrative leave. He was part of the RFP committee. Did he have a grudge against EEP? I think so. Was this all retaliation? You can make a case. So that's the most recent thing that happened in the trial. Let's take a quick break.
Hey, teacher besties, I'm Andrea Forcum, and I am so excited to share with you that my book, They Never Taught Us That, is available right now. It is everything an experienced or first-year teacher needs to manage the chaos of the modern classroom, including some anecdotes to make you feel a little bit better. Because if there is a way that you can screw up, I've probably done it. It also has advice on how to build trust with families, how to manage grading and lesson plans and IEPs and everything else that they never went over in your teacher prep program. They Never Taught Us That is available everywhere right now.
Hey, Krista, remember how you love eyelid mites now?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of confusion out there. I want to clear something up.
Okay.
All right. People think they can get eyelid mites from dogs and cats.
Can they?
No. These particular Demodex mites are specific to humans.
Okay.
So spread from dogs and cats is not expected. That's a myth.
Can't get them from cuddling our poodle.
No. Demodex mites that cause blepharitis live on humans. Most adults already have them. They just usually don't cause problems. It's when they overgrow that they can lead to itchy, red, irritated eyelids. Those little collarettes.
Mm-hmm. The crusties at the base of the eyelashes.
Right.
And the good news is there's a prescription eye drop available for Demodex blepharitis.
That is great news. To learn more about eyelid health and Demodex blepharitis, visit miteslovelids.com. Again, that's miteslovelids.com to learn more. This ad is brought to you by Tarsus Pharmaceuticals. So next week, I'm going to have another update for you. We're going to hear from the judge. And I'm also meant to say, so at the end of testimony, the judge kind of tipped his hat a bit for where he might rule on this case. And it was very telling. He basically admonished Apollo MD, really both PeaceHealth and Apollo MD, just for not taking this state law seriously. It was very clear that they didn't, in this whole process, the RFP process, deciding to give it to Apollo MD coming in, nobody really seriously considered the impact that this anti-corporate practice of medicine law, this state law, this new state law would have. Didn't even consider it. And that tends to piss off judges, it turns out. And then the judge went on to admonish the testifying physicians from Apollo MD, Drs. Patel and Chapman. Patel, the CEO, Chapman, the patsy. Basically, he said that their testimony basically amounted to lying under oath. He said those words, lying under oath. I'd be pooping my pants a little bit if I was one of those doctors, to be honest. Like, that's wow. And the reason he said that was because he recognized, because this judge is very astute, obviously. I mean, he's a judge. He's a federal judge. Like, you got to be smart to get that far. Said that their testimony was muddying the waters, and they were just very evasive and trying to obfuscate the relationship between the MSO, Apollo MD, and the clinical entity, lane emergency physicians. And the whole testimony, there was like, oh, it's totally separate. There's no overlap. But there was no documentation to support that. Who's paying for the creation of lane emergency physicians? All these questions, and they're like basically, I don't know. There's a lot of I don't know. And the judge had this just incredible line that I just every time I think about it, it just brings joy to my heart. He said, I might be, and this is in relation to the testimony from the vague testimony from these Apollo MD doctors. The judge said, they may be brighter bulbs than I, but it doesn't take much wattage to see what is right in front of you. Judge Kasabai from this case in front of everybody. Like, damn. So you never want to be too optimistic, because anything could happen. But I'd say we're all cautiously optimistic of how this will go. And maybe by the time you're listening next week, you'll know. I'll certainly know. And hopefully we'll have a big celebration on this podcast in a week. That's my hope. And then if we've shown that there's merit to this case and that the new Oregon law works, look out. All of you MSO, clinical entity, MSO, PC, collaborations, private equity owned, physician owned, whoever. If you're an MSO and you're bringing in an army of locums doctors into every community and trying to replace local doctors, watch out, because every state's going to be one a piece of this. Every state. Lawsuits, it's going to be, get ready, because things are changing. We're done. We are done. So I hope you're ready for that, because and I, with my platform, I'm going to be trying to amplify as much of this as possible, because oh man, I want to see it. So tired of private equity, so sick of it. Okay, so last thing is, I promised you some new treatment, potential treatment options in the world of retinoblastoma. And so, are you ready for this? I don't think you're going to be ready. And this came from a comment on the YouTube channel. So at Glockenfleckens, go see that. I'm actually I'll go over a few of these comments. I got some good ones on the recent episode. This was on the "Is Vision Insurance Worth It" episode, in which I got a handful of comments, basically all of them like, no, of course not. At Amanda Bevan 6331, I will be dropping my vision insurance during open enrollment this year. It covers next to nothing on my glasses, and I only got it for my routine vision. But guess what? You can get just a routine medical exam too, and your medical insurance will cover it. That's what I recommend. Let's see, a couple, people regretting their vision insurance. It just doesn't anyway. So that's so you can read my thoughts about vision insurance on that episode. But one of the comments just came out of nowhere. At the Jenna Daisy said, "Can you talk about the pig semen eye drops? It seems like a really cool and attention grabbing innovation." I am just learning. I read this comment, and this is my first time learning that pig semen eye drops have been in the news. I've been so focused on this case with Apollo MD and Eugene Emergency Physicians. I haven't been keeping up with my pig semen news. So I went looking for it. Pig semen eye drops may treat rare childhood eye cancer, study says. So this was published in I want to say Science. I think it was Science or Nature. What was it? I think it's Science. Anyway, one of the big ones. And this is a basic science study. So this was done in mice, first of all. So no humans were involved in the pig semen study, in which they used an exome sequence isolated from pig semen, I guess because it has good penetration through certain tissues, put it into an eye drop, and used it in mice to target retinoblastoma, which is obviously a disease that affects the retina, the back part of the eye. And this is the first time any kind of eye drop has been thought of to be used to treat this disease, obviously. And what they found was the tumor sizes in the mice that received the pig semen were reduced in size. After 30 days, the tumors were about 2 to 3% of the size of those in untreated mice. Researchers also believe that the use of sperm-delivered treatment in the eye could also treat other forms of eye disease, such as macular degeneration. I am happy not only as an ophthalmologist, but as a comedian. Like, there is nothing that brings me more joy than successfully, potentially treating childhood cancer and using semen to do so. It just is, it's a confluence of my two loves. I won't say that because I have several loves, family loves as well, but my two professional loves of comedy and medicine. It's a perfect confluence. And will I one day, from my clinical practice, be sending a prescription for pig semen eye drops to the pharmacy? I sure hope so, folks, because this sounds promising. Again, just in mice. So we'll see where it goes. Stay tuned for pig semen eye drops. You know, I thought it was a joke when I first saw that comment. I was like, there's no way. There's no way this is a joke. This is I thought it was some kind of misinformation. Like someone was using pig semen on TikTok to treat something. Sure enough, though, it's in the literature. It's science now. And so we can't just gloss over it. But it does remind me of the first bit of medical misinformation that I ever fought as a resident was a Facebook group in which they were using aged urine eye drops to treat a variety of eye conditions. And the whole group was people commenting my eyes feel really irritated after doing this. Do I keep going, or is that part of the healing process? And people were giving recommendations on how long do you age your urine, the color it should be, any additives. So anyway, that was in the back of my mind when I heard pig semen eye drops. But no, this is much more legitimate sounding than aged human urine eye drops. So I will update you as we go. And that's it for Knock Knock Eye. Thank you all for joining me. I am Dr. Glockenflecken. Thanks to my executive producers, Aaron Cordy, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brook. Editor and engineer, Jason Portizo. Our music is by Omer Benz-V. Knock Knock Eye is a human content production. I will see you next week. Knock, knock, goodbye. Thanks for watching the episode. You can find more on that playlist over there. If you prefer to listen, or you just had your eyes dilated, you can binge full episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Or join the party over on Patreon, where you get early access episodes, hang out with us, get lots of exclusive bonus content. Help you subscribe, leave a comment below. Let us know what you think.